Headline, Los Angeles TD quiz. Saturday's Notre Dame Florida State telecast got a Monday Night Football type rating here. True or false? Answer. Did you say false?
Yeah, I did.
You're right. That's wrong.
Wait, what?
Well, not quite up to Monday Night Football standards. Only a 14.4 rating, but a strong 38 share for Notre Dame Florida State.
Right. Okay.
Dateline, Los Angeles TV follow-up. USC Washington overlapped the Fighting Irish telecast. And that was too bad for the Surgeons. Against Notre Dame, Florida State's 14.4 and 38, the Surgeons and Huskies did only a 4.7 and 12.
Alan Malamud, popular columnist for The Times, was one of Jim Healy's friends and confidants, and Jim often referred to him simply as Mud.
Headline, Los Angeles Society columnist Mud. I'm with you. How can Missouri be a sleeper in the NCAA tournament? The NCAA tournament.
Hey, what?
Well, Missouri is co-favored with Arizona 2-1 in the West Regional. Also is the fourth choice overall at 8-1 to emerge the 1994 NCAA champion.
Right.
Blow it out.
Jim was unique, though. He's one of a kind. You couldn't get it from anybody else, and that's quite a compliment because, he's the only guy that did what he did, and he did it very well, and he was very popular, and I didn't agree with everything he said, but if I did, something would have been wrong. Always interesting, never a dull moment.
Jim spent a great deal of his day writing for his 5:30 show. How good a writer was he? We put the question to 710 Talk morning sports anchor Joe McDonnell, who has bridged the gap between writer and reporter.
I think his writing skills, along with being a great reporter, were two of the things that separated him. I mean, there's a lot of people who go on the air and who sound great, but there's really not much substance behind them. As you well know, if you saw one of Jim Healy's scripts, he typed every one of them on that little typewriter he had in his office. Every one of them was hand-edited by him. And to sound like he did on the air, reading from a script, it has to be well written. He was an amazing writer.
And Joe, he was a perfectionist, a stickler for good English, grammar, and sentence construction.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you're going to criticize newspapers for being grammatically wrong, you better know it, and you better be a perfectionist, because it'd be real easy for somebody to jump down your throat. But he knew the language really, really well, and he used it every day. I don't think you could go back over 20 or 30 years and find a poorly written script.
Joe McDonnell stated that Healy had to be on solid ground if he was criticizing publications like the giant Los Angeles Times. And so he was. Periodically, sports editor Bill Dwyer would receive that dreaded on-the-air memo. Bill, after Jim's death, you wrote a touching story about him, and you stated in no uncertain terms that when that memo to journalist Bill arrived, you listened.
Oh, you had to, because he was right so often. I mean, on things like that, he was always right. He would find the stupidest things we did, and frequently I hadn't spotted them myself. What happens with me, Steve, is you're involved in putting out the paper, and you try to stopgap all these things that might go wrong. But invariably, the next morning you pick up the section, and whatever is wrong will jump right out at you. You'll see it immediately. There were many times when I didn't even see it, and it would be the next night, and he'd have me, and he did it in never a mean way and always a chiding way. And the thing was that he was smart in that he, even in the days when the Herald Examiner was around and had a very good sports section, he wouldn't go after them, he'd go after the big guy, which I think is fair game, and I think that's right. He went after us.
And even with his criticisms of your sports section, he often referred to it as world champion.
Was not easily pleased. I mean, everybody around here in the world of sports in Los Angeles knows that if he got on you, it was hard to get him off of you, and you had to earn whatever respect you got from him. And so for him to chop us a little bit every day, but then in the overview to say, hey, ladies and gentlemen, no matter what I'm saying, this is, when all is said and done, a world champion. Yeah, that meant a lot.
If you didn't know Jim Healy too well or understand where he was coming from, he could be very intimidating. Al Brady Law, who was Jim's manager at KLAC for a short time in the 80s, explains.
Metro Media, being the large corporation that it is, was always scared of being sued, and particularly when Jim got on the air and started ranting and raving, they were always afraid he was going to get us sued, and of course he never did, but nevertheless, Metro Media wanted Healy to always sign an indemnity clause, that if he got us sued, He would indemnify us, and he would pay the cost and take over the defense and all of that. The only problem was the Metro Media lawyers were scared to death of Jim. So when it came time to have him re-sign his indemnity clause, nobody wanted to talk to him about it. So as the general manager of the station, it fell to me, and I said, well, Healy and I get along great. I'll be glad to talk to him about it. So I called Jim, and I said, when you come in this afternoon, come in early enough to come spend some time with me. I need to talk to you. And I had the indemnity clause sitting on my desk. And when he walked into the office, he didn't even say a word. He saw what was on the desk, and he just broke out laughing, almost fell on the floor, and he said, "Those damn lawyers are scared to talk to me again, aren't they, Al?" And, of course, then he went ahead and signed it, but that was just the way he was. He delighted in the fact, I think, that the bark was much worse than the bite, but most people didn't know that. He was a wonderful, wonderful character.
In December 1984, KLAC changed hands. The new owners wanted Healy to switch to mornings, but Healy wanted no part of it. So he contacted a lawyer. It was none other than Rich Brown, now the president of the California Angels.
One day I was sitting in my office in Century City, and I got a phone call. I immediately recognized his voice, and we talked, and he had a problem with KLAC radio, where they moved him from the 5:30 slot to the morning slot, and he wanted OUT. Then we worked very closely together for about 4 months. And it was just terrific. It worked out well. He went back to KMPC. I became a listener again and a fan as always.
The flag is up.
I got the horse right here, the name is Paul Revere, and here's a guy that says if the weather's clear, I'm can do, can do. This guy says the horse can do, but look at Effort, he wins it by a half.
Jim Healy was completely captivated with thoroughbred racing. For years, he spent almost every weekend at a Southland track. We asked son Patrick if he could pinpoint the beginning of his father's fascination with the sport of kings.
My earliest memories as a child were that my father was a big fight fan and loved to go see the thoroughbreds run. And in fact, I can recall just a little toddler being in the paddock at Del Mar and at Santa Anita. That was one of his real early enjoyments. He told the story about how he talked his father into taking him out to Santa Anita on opening day. And I think he would have been 9 or 10 years old at the time.
Jim's old friend Don Page remembers going to the races with him way back in the 50s.
We loved horse races, and Healy invited me to go to the races with him one Saturday, and I remember going over to his house. At the time, he was doing 2 shows on radio on KBIG, one in the morning and one at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So he was racing all over Hollywood. He'd write for Kelly, record his show, come back. And anyway, the Saturday morning, I'll never forget it, he's doing his show from his home in Toluca Lake, and he was one of the first to do that. He was all equipped with beautiful equipment and all that. Nice. He was sitting there in his pajamas doing his sports show while his wife, Pat, was mowing the lawn. And I thought that was unique. And that's sort of, Jim always kind of found a way to take it the easy way around things. So, he worked hard, but he was a colorful guy. I always thought he was Hollywood's version of Nathan Detroit.
Oh, that's a bunch of bull.
Healy became so enamored with the Bangtails that he became an owner. Dick Whittinghill, the man who woke up Southern California for 30 years as KMPC's famous morning man, was Healy's friend, neighbor, and business partner.
Oh, I've known him for years and years. We lived a couple blocks away, and his wife, Pat, and my wife, Willie, were very good friends. And my 2 daughters used to play with their son, Peeker, who was Patrick Healy and doing a great job on television now. And Healy and I and Henry Slate, the 3 of us got into horse racing. And we got these horses, and we'd race them. They're claimers, And I think we claimed them for $10,000 or something like that, real cheap. And one horse called Pink Coat won 3 times up in Tanforan. So now he brought him down to Santa Anita, going to race him. Because we weren't able to go into the winner's circle up there to receive a reward. So now before the race, I'm all dressed up, and so is Healy. And we're standing in the winner's circle waiting, and the horse runs a dead last. So that blew that thing.
Jockey Bill Harmatz recalls that Healy and Bob Kelly were big boosters early in his career.
That's true. They sure were, and they were a great help. I remember back in '53 when I first started riding at Cali, Bob Kelly started kind of picked me up, and so did Jim, and they were one of my biggest boosters.
Well, Jim loved thoroughbred racing, and you saw him often at the track. You ever give him a tip?
Yeah, I try to give Jim a few tips, but, and we did get lucky a couple times, but many a time they ran down the racetrack like a lot of them do.